Welcome to our series on AI, where we are going to be discussing developments in this rapidly evolving landscape, both the promises and opportunities, as well as the pitfalls. Today, our topic is going to be the wonderful world of AI and insurance. I am Carolyn Rosenberg, a partner in our Chicago Insurance Recovery Group, where we tackle issues on behalf of policyholders. With me is my partner, Anthony Crawford, and we'll get right to it. You certainly can't pick up any kind of social media, newspaper, article, chat room, elevator conversation without talking about the wonderful world of AI. And we're going to narrow it a little bit to AI exposures. Anthony, can you give us sort of an overview snapshot of what kind of exposures we're seeing currently, both in the U.S. and abroad?
All right. Thanks, Carolyn, and it's a pleasure to be here with you today. One of the things that we're seeing right now is there are a couple of different fronts. First and foremost, some of the more prominent cases that you will see and probably hear about in the news, either individual or class action suits that are coming from various artists about the use of either their body of work, their likeness, and so on forth, specifically targeting sort of the AI, the companies that are using AI to produce this content. The artists are basically, saying that these AI platforms are violating their rights by reproducing their likeness or their body of work or their voice or their visual likeness. You are also seeing in other fronts, even in relative to what we do in the insurance world, you've seen some actions against insurance companies for sort of the use or potential use of AI in their claims handling. You will generally see some claims or allegations that the insurance companies are sort of giving up their responsibilities in claim handling using a person and actually, sort of deferring that over to AI platforms, presumably for efficiency's sake.
And those kinds of claims are, I would take it, more in the discrimination bent or unfair practices, those sorts of allegations?
Absolutely. You will see, in terms of, specifically for insurance, yes, it'll be sort of unfair claims handling, in essence, not putting a human touch to it, because, one of the things that we found with AI is that it is only as good as the input that goes into it. So if certain parameters are put in, for example, the AI platform or the algorithm used could lead to discriminatory output. And, although it may be inadvertent, the users of those platforms still bear that responsibility for what they put out.
Right. And in addition to sort of claims with regard to the professional use, the use in business, et cetera, one can also foresee with regard to boards of directors and the duties of care and fiduciary obligations, that there could be questions with regard to disclosure issues. What's the use of AI within the company? How is that safeguarded? How is that addressed? I'm sure that's something on your mind as well. Absolutely.
I mean, one of the things to think about is that AI is a tool to be used by an organization or an entity, just like any other tool. And with the use of tools, the wielder of that tool is responsible for how that tool is used, where it goes, and what's done with it. There's no difference here with AI. And so when companies make a business decision to incorporate AI into their business operations, they are going to be ultimately held accountable for how that is implemented. And to the extent that liabilities arise, they will ultimately have to face those liabilities, just the same as if it was done by an actual person.
Right. And we've also seen the concerns with regard to cyber and data exposure and ransomware claims, and really a question of not if, but when a company may be hit by that. And of course, AI can factor into those potential breaches, concerns, and liabilities. So assuming that we, have just even covered the basic waterfront, we want to shift focus now into how are we going to address that exposure in terms of who pays. who's responsible if we want to try to both explore the technology, use the technology, and certainly be protected. And insurance is typically seen as a risk transfer mechanism in those situations. Here on the insurance landscape, just starting with the sort of narrow, there are some AI-specific insurance policies that have been marketed. Most of those are really with respect to and aimed at AI startups, those who are actually developing the technology, as opposed to those who are a big public company that is utilizing or taking some experimental view of generative AI or other use of AI. With regard to those kinds of startups, whether it's Vouch or Munich Re or AI Self-Insure, they are designed to be sort of customized applications to get at some of the startups where AI is the core part of the product or service that is being offered, and really are claiming to kind of cover some of the risks that you would traditionally see from a professional liability or errors and omissions kind of exposure. But we really haven't seen the adoption widespread of AI-specific policies. I think one of the concerns is to make sure, too, that we don't see on the corresponding end any AI-specific exclusions. I think there are a couple out there, but they are certainly not widespread. And the question is then, if you're not an AI startup that is looking at specific AI coverage for your losses, then for the average bear, the general corporate client or a private or public company, where does AI exposure fit? Do they need to be worrying about a separate AI policy, or will current policies typically protect them? What do you think, Anthony?
I would argue absolutely no, not at this point, that they need to start looking at separate specialized AI policies, for the simple fact that, as I said before, AI is a tool. It is no different from, for example, you say you have a hiring department. Now, you could have a mistake made by a human being in looking at applications that ultimately you may, their input causes some discriminatory effect. The same as if you could run into that same situation where the algorithm used by the AI, say, for example, discriminates against women over a certain age and will just automatically flag them for not hiring. In both instances, the corporation is still going to be responsible for their discriminatory acts. And it doesn't matter that it was a live person that did it or it was the computer algorithm that did it. The organization still bears the responsibility for that. And there are insurance policies that exist right now with arguably no exclusions to that coverage because they're not discriminating on, they're not discerning between who the actor is. They're only discerning the actual act and the results of those acts itself.
Right. So that would be, in case you're speaking of an employment practices liability insurance policy. You have, of course, directors and officers liability insurance policies, professional liability policies, tech errors and omissions policies, a whole panoply of coverages where you need to be on the lookout to make sure that the definitional sections, cyber, of course, and data privacy are broad enough to cover the utilization of AI and make sure there are no exclusions. And Anthony, you indicated at the beginning that there were some claims against, potential insurers for the use of, and there's also been a little bit of a burst of activity on the legislative front. What are you seeing with regard to some of the legislative activity, I think in New York and in Colorado, and the legislative ways to address some of the AI insurance risks?
Right. So both Colorado and New York are starting to take proactive steps to ensure that they're protecting the insurance consumers, policyholders in those jurisdictions. They are currently putting out guidance as to how insurance companies, or reiterating rather, how insurance companies should be using sound claims handling practices, and that if they are going to incorporate AI into their claims handling practices, that incorporation must comply, just the same as if it was a human claims handler, with the guidance that those states have put out in terms of fair claims handling practices. It is in their early stages. Obviously, legislation moves slower than technology, but it is very, very promising to see that these jurisdictions are taking a look at this and trying to get ahead of this, and at least providing some guidance to both the insurance industry as well as putting a body of work that policyholders can look to if, for example, something does arise that implicates sort of unfair claims handling practices through the use of AI by insurance companies.
That makes perfect sense. So being vigilant, looking at your policy, negotiating terms and conditions, which is a lot of what we do, being very vigilant with regard to insurance policy forms, exercising good risk management, being aware of legislation that may be at your doorstep or coming soon. Anthony, as we close out our session, quick question for you. Are you excited by the world of AI, or are you fearful and concerned?
Well, I rewatched The Terminator the other day, so I'm not convinced that Skynet is happening, just in the next few days or so. But look, the fact of the matter is AI, much like computers and cell phones, there's a new technology, and a technology that is being proliferated largely around the world, and it is not going anywhere. So this is something that we are going to have to deal with as a human race. And if we can get ahead and put some safeguards and guardrails around AI, I think it will be very, very helpful. Now, at the end of the day, life happens, things go wrong, and there will inevitably be litigation over certain claims related to AI. And corporations have insurance to hedge against those risks. That's where we come in. And I envision a future where AI is something that is going to be litigated, and it's something that will be the subject of insurance claims. It will be questions that arise in insurance coverage cases. For example, in the discovery process, one of the things that we're starting to see is that you're seeing a lot of questions around, whether insurance companies are actually using AI as part of their claims handling practice. We're going to see more and more of that in many, many, many different realms. I could easily see that in the medical field, when you're evaluating this patient's file, that you use AI to go through it, so on and so forth. So yes, it is here to stay. And, it's important that we have thought leadership out there to learn how to deal with it.
Thank you very much. Insurance should offer some protection and be diligent in reviewing that to make sure those promises are kept and that the premiums that are paid are used to get the actual excellent coverage that you seek. Anthony, thank you so much. We'll look forward to discussing additional topics in this ever-evolving environment. Thank you so much.
It is my pleasure.